Hi, and welcome to the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast, where we help you understand how your past painful experiences are affecting your current reality and how you can shift those so you can create your desired future. I'm Dr. Lee, and both myself and our team at the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety are excited to support you on your journey. We talk about all the things on this podcast. No topic gets left uncovered. So, extending a content warning to you before we get started. If you notice yourself getting activated while listening, invitation to take care of yourself and to pause, skip ahead a bit, or just check out another episode. Let's dive in. Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome to this week's episode, 5 tips for trauma-sensitive self-care for business owners, entrepreneurs, people who sell, right? I'm really excited to talk about this because I think that self-care for entrepreneurs and business owners a lot of times gets tied up. Like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm diving straight in. It gets tied up with money. And we learn that the way that we take care of ourselves is by making more money so that we can hire more support and we can do more fun things and we can afford the spa and the fancy clothes and the 1,000 bajillion count thread sheets and the bigger house and all that. And that's just one way that I think we have added some trauma and added some, what's the word I'm looking for? Elitist, privileged. We've added this lens to self-care, which I just really don't like. I don't think it feels good for a lot of people. So I wanted to talk you through some practical self-care tips that I don't care if you have negative dollars in your bank account. These are all things that you can do. You can do them right now. Also, I want to just reframe what self-care is because, again, I think a lot of us are taught that it's, I'm going to be able to get more things to be able to take care of myself better or have people support me, take things off my plate, so on and so forth. And that's really not what self-care is. So when we look at the definition of self-care, right? Self-care is ensuring your needs are met. And not just your needs around all the good stuff, also your needs around guidance, like deciding what you are supposed to do next, your needs around boundaries and discipline. Ooh, right? Some people love that word. Some people hate that word. Really looking at my needs, my mental needs, my emotional needs, my physical needs, my financial needs, my sexual needs, my intimate needs, all of those things. And a lot of business owners, we are taught to neglect our needs. We're taught to neglect our needs and to hustle and to grind and to strive. And we're taught that self-care, being able to care for ourselves, will come on the other side of the success. And what I have found is that 95% of people end up just burning themselves out before they get to that success because they're so tired, because they're overwhelmed, because they don't have the support, because they've hired people that they think are going to support them who aren't the right humans for them. There's so many different places that I see business owners get taken off track, entrepreneurs get taken off track. And I say off track, not like there's a right track and a wrong track. I mean, taken off their track. Taken off the path that they are designed to take because somebody else says, oh, this is what you need to do, instead of going, no, what do I need right here? So let's get into it. The 3 core pieces of self-care that we teach at the Institute are nurturing, guidance, and boundaries / limits / discipline. So let's start with nurturing. Now, nurturing is an interesting one because nurturing is also around making sure your needs are met. It's about it's about love, and it's about feeling safe, and it's about feeling rested and replenished and well fed, well nourished. It's about ensuring that our cups are filled up, that we have what we need from an energy perspective and a capacity perspective and a time perspective. And for a lot of us, we were raised by caregivers who we either watched not nurture themselves or who didn't fully nurture us. So maybe we were raised by a caregiver that was like really mean to themselves, restricted things for themselves, worked really hard, never rested until they, like were literally bone tired, and even then sometimes didn't. And rightly so in a lot of those cases, right? A lot of times our caregivers were like literally trying to survive. So we're not making our caregivers wrong for that. But that's what was modeled is life is hard work, things are hard, you have to work hard. If it's not hard, it's not right. And then also for some of us on the flip side, there was the piece of like, you have to be perfect at everything you do. Everything should come out just right. If it doesn't come out just right, you failed. And, that's more of like the guidance piece. But this nurturing piece is, yeah, I'm going to love you and I'm going to take care of you. And I'm going to make sure that your needs are met, that you have the shelter and the food and the resources that you need in order to be able to not just survive, to be able to thrive. So a lot of us just weren't modeled good nurturing, or we weren't fully nurtured, right? Maybe our parent worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week to put food on the table and make sure the lights stayed on and did all those things. And they couldn't then be there for like hugs and kisses and bedtime and soccer games and those things. So, maybe your physical needs were provided for, but like your emotional needs weren't because your family members were literally too busy. Or maybe they were healing from their own things. Maybe they had their own trauma. So that's one place that nurturing, sometimes we can be missing nurturing because it wasn't modeled for us from a caregiver perspective. And then when you add in the business perspective, right? A lot of us are taught to not nurture ourselves when we work for someone else, because most of us work for someone else first before we work for ourselves. So there's another place that we're not taught to nurture ourselves. I use this example a lot when I talk to healthcare providers about self-care. I still, 2.5 years after leaving the bedside, as a clinical, as a nurse practitioner, I still struggle to go to the bathroom when my body gives me cues that I need to go to the bathroom. And that's because I learned to hold it until it was convenient to go, aka I had a moment to run. And so I was used to just waiting until I absolutely couldn't wait any longer to go to the bathroom. And I like really lost those cues for a while. And now the cue comes earlier on. And I have to like have this conversation with myself of like, get up and go to the bathroom. You are allowed to pause what you're doing and go take care of your biological needs. You're allowed to get food. You're allowed to get water. You're allowed to stop and stretch. You're allowed to do these things. You're allowed to take breaks. You're allowed to only want to work 25, 30 hours a week. You're allowed to want to do all of what you need before you ever touch a piece of your work in the morning, right? So my nurturing for myself, I really learned to put my needs last, my nurturing needs last in particular, as I was going through the first several years of my adulthood working. And then as an entrepreneur, a lot of times I was neglecting my own needs. And I was like really burning my body out. I started my business while I was also working full time. So I was used to working 80-hour weeks. Those 30-hour weeks felt so weird. It was so weird. I was like, what do I do now? I need to fill this more. And what I started noticing is that my body was like, hey, and we'll get into this when we talk about boundaries and limits. My body was like, hey, 30 hours is all you got, girl. Like, that's it. And that was really hard. The other thing around nurturing is sometimes this requires us to ask other people, like, hey, could you help me? And for a lot of us, we are taught we shouldn't ask for help. We're taught to be independent when in reality, humans are designed to be interdependent. So part of nurturing too is like, do I feel safe asking for help? Do I feel safe admitting that I need something that I can't do on my own, that I would need someone else to provide for me? And a lot of the models that we have in business are like, no, you have to like be a self-made person. Well, that's kind of a silly notion. Why would I want to be a self-made person? Like, that's not a flex. It's not a flex that no one helped me get here. I think it's actually a much bigger flex to be like, I had so many people help me because we had really great relationships and they helped me because they wanted to help and I wanted their help and I helped them at times. And it was just a really great, mutually beneficial relationship. Nurturing is something that I see left out of so many business spaces, coaching, masterminds, all of those things. Like, we're not talking about, and this is actually one of the first places I start with people a lot, is I'm like, look, we need to make sure your needs are met. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you drinking water? Are you resting? Are you taking time away from social media? Are you helicoptering your business? Because if not, if you're not doing these things, or if you are helicoptering your business and just staying in it constantly, you're going to be exhausted, and you're not going to have the energy that you need, and you're not going to have the passion, because your passion goes away when you get burned out, when you get exhausted, right? Your body goes into survival mode. There's no room for passion when you're in survival mode, like in most cases, right? Unless you get really motivated and passionate to get out of survival mode. So that's actually something that I love about our Trauma Sensitive Business Collective, is we really focus in on what are your personal needs, what needs to get focused on so that you have safety and you have replenishment and nourishment and space and rest, so that your work can come through more easily, so that you can have more curiosity, so that you can feel better and have more capacity and time and energy to do the things. So that's the first part. That's the first tip, is like, ask yourself what you need in terms of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial, sexual. Like, what do you need in order to feel rejuvenated, in order to feel nourished? And from there, how are we going to meet those needs? The second tip is looking at the kind of guidance you're receiving. Now, obviously, I'm biased. I think our Trauma Sensitive Business Collective is the place that business owners should come for guidance, because we're not going to give you guidance that is based on what we think you should do. We're not going to give you guidance based on how we see the world. We're going to help you see the world the way you want to see it, and help you bring your business to the world the way you want to bring it to the world. I was actually stepping off the humble bus for a second, because this is still a place that's kind of hard for me. A lot of people don't believe it. It's very hard for me to brag still sometimes. We were doing a live in our free Facebook group, and I was talking about how excited I am for the Trauma Sensitive Business Collective, because the next cohort starts March 2nd. I'm so excited for it because Sarah and I are co-leading it, and she and I are like really good teachers. We're really good teachers. We both have, like, together, decades of experience in the adult education space, like at a university, at the college level, in addition to how much we've taught in our own businesses. And we understand how to coach, we understand how to teach, we understand how to mentor, and we understand how to lead. We also understand how to serve and how to follow. And I think guidance is one of these things that, again, as a kid, if your parents or your caregivers were too strict around the guidance, like maybe they guided you in ways that felt really not great, or maybe there was an absence of guidance and they kind of just like let you do whatever you wanted, right? Neither of those, either side of that spectrum, if we go too far on either side, either I'm not going to get any guidance from anyone and I'm just going to trust myself all the time completely and never learn anything new or ask for any advice or question anything, versus like, I'm not going to trust myself at all and I'm going to just put all of the decisions on someone else, like my mentor or my coach or whoever's leading me. Both of those typically come from a place of trauma. They typically come from a place of trauma because the first one of, I'm not going to get advice from anyone and I'm going to just do this on my own and not ask any questions, comes from I don't trust other people, right? Now, it's either I don't trust other people to give me good advice, or I don't trust other people to be kind to me when I ask for advice, because I ask and I'm not saying this, but I've heard this, like, I ask stupid questions, or I don't know the right questions to ask, or, I don't pick the right mentor. There's something wrong with me, right? So either I don't trust other people to give me good advice, or I don't trust other people to be kind to me or say things that are going to feel good because I'm the problem. And then on this other side of, I'm going to give this decision to anyone else, every time things get hard. Well, that, you're giving away your power. You're giving away your decision. And then I see that come from trauma because people don't trust themselves, because they've been taught not to trust themselves. And so they're like, okay, well, I'll just trust whomever else. The problem with that is, though, is it's probably not going to work because they're not you. So you have to, you don't have to, but if you want to run a business that feels really good for you, you got to do the work around figuring out who you're going to get guidance from, when you're going to ask for guidance, why you ask for guidance in specific moments, how you're going to ask for guidance. And one of my favorite things to teach people about is how to ask yourself for guidance. So one of my favorite techniques to use around guidance is I ask myself, my future self, like, what are we going to want? What if in 3 months from now we looked back and watched all the actions we took up until that point? Like, what actions would we have wanted to take? What would we be proud of? What would we be excited that we did? Right? Not necessarily the outcomes, but like, what would we be excited about from a showing up place, from a taking action place? Or maybe it's not taking action. What would we be excited about saying no to? What would we be excited about or happy about or thankful that we said yes to? When you can start to like put yourself in that future self position, it shifts the way you think about what you're going to do in the present, because the choices you make in this present moment now have, like, you can see where they're taking you. So asking my future self for guidance is one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the places I start. What would my future self want me to do right here? And then if I'm not clear, sometimes what my future self says is phone a friend. Like, go phone a friend, please. And this is why I think it's so important to have people around you that you trust, that, and we're going to talk a lot about trust, actually teach about trust in our spaces, because, part of the Institute's name is psychological safety. Psychological safety hinges on trust. And trust is one of those things that I think a lot of people think they understand. And it's really more nuanced, and there's multiple parts to trusting someone. And so in our collective, we want to help you start to trust yourself and know when to trust others. And so understanding those 4 key pieces around trust and how that leads to psychological safety. By the way, psychological safety is I get to show up as my full self and take risks without fear of persecution, loss of love, safety, or belonging. That's psychological safety. So we want to guide ourselves in ways, and we want to seek guidance from people in a way that preserves or fosters psychological safety, right? And that's going to require some vulnerability, because we never know the first time we ask somebody if they're going to be kind to us or not. We might think they are, and we don't know. So there's some vulnerability around guidance and looking at, okay, what do I need in order to be able to trust myself again? Because a lot of business owners have trauma around self-trust as well. Maybe you've said you're going to do something a bunch of times and you stop and start and stop and start, or maybe, you don't follow through on things that you've agreed to do, or maybe you say yes a bunch of places that you really want to say no, and then you feel resentful. Like, there's just so many places that there can be trauma around guidance and mentoring and coaching. Not to mention if you've hired a business coach or joined a mastermind in the past and they haven't treated you kindly, that there wasn't psychological safety, that you couldn't trust the leader, that they taught you in ways that actually led you further away from yourself rather than toward yourself, toward a more aligned strategy for yourself. And so this is a place that we will be focusing on in the collective as well. The third piece is boundaries, limits, discipline. So when you add all these things together, a lot of people are like, well, those are 3 different things. I'm like, yes, and the whole thing about this is knowing what is yours and what is other people, knowing your limits and knowing other people's limits, and being disciplined enough to honor that, to honor your boundaries and your limits, and also to honor other people's boundaries and their limits. And honestly, this is a place that things go really wrong a lot of times, and a lot of business coaching and a lot of business mastermind spaces. Because most business masterminds and most business coaches do not set effective boundaries. They do not know how to set effective boundaries. It's why we teach boundaries in our collective. It's why we teach containering, is what we call it. helping people understand what is inside of this space that somebody is joining, what will happen in this relationship, and what won't happen in this relationship, what is outside of that container. People really like to be certain around and know, okay, what's cool in this space and what's not. And if you don't know how to set that up, number one, invitation to come join the collective because we'll show you exactly how. And number two, like, that's going to cause some problems. It's going to cause problems. If you don't know how to effectively container your spaces as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, that's going to cause problems. And it's not even just spaces with your clients, it's spaces with yourself. If you say you're only going to work 2 hours today and end up working 5, or flip, if you say, yep, I'm going to get this thing done and then I don't, right? If you are setting boundaries around this is mine and this is yours, or this is what we're going to do together, or this is what we can both agree on, and you keep violating those boundaries or those limits, if there's no discipline around, yes, I said I was going to do this thing, so I'm going to do this thing. And also, I said I wasn't going to do this thing, so I'm not going to do this thing. Like, as somebody who used to be very undisciplined and very poor boundaried, hear me, because some of y'all might be like being mean to yourself as you're hearing this. This is not an invitation to be mean to yourself, because you're my friend and I'm not friends with people who are mean to their friends. So please stop being mean to my friend if you're being mean to yourself right now. Like, I used to do this too. I was so undisciplined. I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And then I wouldn't do it. And I had to build back up that self-trust. And that was getting good guidance, making sure my needs were met were a big part of that, because I couldn't do what I said I was going to do when I was agreeing to everything and I had no boundaries. And I also had no time and no energy and no capacity for anything extra. So learning how to define your limits, right? I talked about this in the beginning. My limit really is a 30-hour work week. Except for the rare occasion, I'm only going to be on, right? On for other people, with other people, on average 30 hours. And if it's going to be more than that, there's going to be some big break time either before or after. I'm hosting a retreat this week. And then the following week, I am speaking at an event. And then the following week, guess what I'm doing? I'm hopping on a plane to go to Phoenix with my sister for 3.5 days. And I'm going to work a little while I'm there, but like, she's going to be working off doing her own thing. And I'm just going to chill because I'm going to use that time to like regroup and reconnect with myself and give myself some nurturing, because I know that I've got these 2 big weeks coming up. The fourth self-care tip is learning how to emotionally regulate. And this is one that's like super simple and also very hard. Learning how to emotionally regulate and handle your feelings. And I say this the way I say it because guess what? You can't control your emotions. You cannot control your feelings. You cannot control your emotions. They happen to us, right? What you can do is decide how you're going to respond to them. You can decide how you're going to feel them. You can decide how you're going to express them to other people. You can decide how they're going to affect your decision making, but we're not going to control them. We're just going to handle what happens after we have the emotion. And this gets a lot of business owners tripped up. And honestly, this is another place that I really see a lot of trauma being done in business masterminds and in business coaching, because people don't have emotional regulation skills. They don't have nervous system regulation skills. And then they go and coach other people and teach other people, get triggered by those experiences, and then have an emotional reaction that hurts their clients. It hurts the people who have and harms the people who have invested in that. And I've done this. So again, like, being transparent here. In my first days of coaching, before I understood nervous system regulation and emotional regulation, before I did my own work, I was so much more dysregulated all the time. And clients could really trigger me. Fast forward to this week, had a really uncomfortable experience and worked through it, set boundaries, did not operate from urgency, was able to feel my feelings and then respond, take responsibility for what happened next. And had a really, really positive outcome from that because I was like, I'm not going to have this thing happen and get really triggered and act from urgency and make an even bigger mess that then I have to clean up. Instead, I'm going to acknowledge that this thing happened. I'm going to tell this person and set a boundary around, I'm going to take some space. I'm going to handle the thing, and then I'm going to move forward in a way that is mutually beneficial, right? And I'm not going to go into a trauma response where I fawn. I'm also not going to fight. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm not going to freeze and overwhelm. I'm going to take the time I need to feel my feelings and process through this and then handle it. So that's number 4, learning how to put some work into nervous system regulation. And again, I think our collective is a fabulous place to do that. We also have some other courses that you can do. We have other podcast episodes on O is for overwhelm is one I think of, where we teach you our easy method. That's the method I use to move through and process my feelings, decide what to do next. A lot of resources around that. If you're like, oh, that sounds amazing, and also I'm not sure how to do that. Well, you can also just come learn it real time with us in the collective. And then the last one is community. Get into community with other people where you feel safe, where you can be yourself. You know, I know I'm plugging the collective this whole time. Not sorry, because at the Institute, we create some of the safest spaces I've ever seen. And I am not afraid to share that. I'm not afraid to share that flex. I gladly share that flex because it's so intentional. It is so intentional. We want you to feel like you can be yourself in our space, that you can bring your whole self, not just your business, but also you, like you personally, and all the other things that are going on in your life to our space and be accepted. And taking care of yourself, humans are not meant to only take care of themselves. We're also meant to care for others. And if you started a business, it's probably because you want to serve other humans, at least in some way. And so you're probably really, really great at serving and maybe not so much practice around receiving. So you get to come in community and practice what we call mutually beneficial relationship. And that's where everybody is both receiving and serving and doing it in a way that feels really aligned with where they're at in the moment. One of the things that we tell people when they come into our spaces is we want you to be selfish in here because we already know you're selfless. We already know you are so good at giving. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here. And we want you to be more selfish. We want you to focus on, what do I need? How do I want to show up? What do I want to ask for? How can I get support? And Sarah and I, and also TLC, my husband, who is going to be our support coach, like we are all there for you to support you. And the rest of the community is going to rally around and support you as well. Our initial cohort group of humans who went through this, through the collective, it was called the Mini Mind at the time. They are like the coolest bunch of humans that now just absolutely love being connected to one another. And it's such a cool thing to be on the internet and see one of them post something and see like 2 or 3 of them in the comments of that cheering them on. And like, I'm not even part of it anymore. I'm like, can I join? They all, like, if I stopped doing this, they would all probably stay connected because they have formed such a beautiful bond. And I think a lot of us have wounds, community wounds, sisterhood wounds, belonging wounds. We have wounds around not being enough or being too much or being rejected, being abandoned, being seen. We have wounds around all of these things. And so the only, like, the place to heal wounds that happen between humans is in a space with other humans. It's not on your own. The fastest way to heal a belonging wound is in a place that you belong, in a place you decide you belong, that also says, yes, you belong here. And that is our space. That is our space for anyone who's like, man, I really don't belong in a lot of spaces. You belong in ours. I promise you do. if it is calling you, if this type of space, if this type of work, if listening to this whole podcast, you're like, man, all of this sounds amazing and I would love to have all of this. This is calling you. And so you get to come in and be in this space with us. We start in 2 days. And if you're hearing this after March 2nd, it's cool because we're going to open this up every 3 months. It's going to be a quarterly thing. So if you're hearing that now, it's all good. And also, like, send us an email because maybe we have a spot. Who knows? We might still have spots open. I honestly don't know what that's going to look like. And if it's a right fit for you, then you hop in. If not, we wait till next round. And we make sure you're supported till then. So we'll figure it out together. But if this is calling to you, it's probably for you. If you're like, wow, I've never been in a business space like this is for you. So nurture yourself. Make sure you've got good guidance. Make sure, give yourself the gift of boundaries and sorting out how you are going to stick to what you agree to do and how to know when to pivot. Learn how to feel your feelings and get into a community where you can really see, oh wow, I am allowed to belong somewhere. I am allowed to have this because you are allowed to have all this. And I know that because I have it and Sarah has it and TLC has it and the other humans in our business spaces have it. And so you get to have it too. We are evidence that you get to have it too, because I promise you there's nothing special about us. You are just as special as we are. And you get to belong. Okay, dog is barking, kids are yelling. That's perfect timing. If you're hearing all that, I love it. And I hope to see you inside the collective. And if not, I hope that you are able to find your own ways to meet these 5 areas from a self-care perspective because you deserve it. Love you all. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Invitation to head to our show notes to check out the offers and connections we mentioned, or you can just head straight over to institutefortrauma.com and hop in our email list so that you never miss any of the cool things that we're doing over at the Institute. Invitation to be well and to take care of yourself this week, and we'll see you next time.